This is the fourth business lunch sponsored by Investec. We've had some fantastic speakers. We had Digby Jones, we had Nick Wheeler, who started Charles Tyrwhitt Shirts, and we had our own Zanny Minton Beddoes, editor of The Economist. But having Lord Hague is, as I say, a remarkable treat for us. So I welcome you all today. We're going to hear from our own girls as well, who are going to tell you about Moreton Enterprises. I've been principal here for 25 years. I started as a callow youth, and now, look at me. But it's been a fantastic journey, and the journey is not over. So, without further ado, and with thanks to Investec again, I would like to introduce our head girl, Tara Beasley, and the two directors of Moreton Enterprises, Martha Stewart and Lily Mannering. Thank you very much.
Moreton Enterprises was founded in 1985 and has, for the last 32 years, provided the girls at Moreton Hall with some unrivaled business opportunities. Long before the word enterprise graced the national curriculum, the girls were gaining some invaluable hands-on business experience. I am sure there are many here today that will recall those early pioneering days of running the farm, the payphones, the fax machines, had to check what those were, and of course, the all-important tuck shop. Not content with these in-house ventures, the Trailblazers of '93 started up a rescue plan to help save the loss-making Gabon train station from closure. Their successful takeover secured a valuable public service and put Moreton Enterprise on the map. And oh, did I forget to mention, they returned the business to profit in just 2 years. The Moreton Enterprise of today would probably be almost unrecognizable to those early pioneers. Run from its own self-funded enterprise centre, the business sees an annual turnover of around £50,000 and has diversified and expanded in ways Lily will tell you about. Nonetheless, I'm sure that many of my day-to-day activities would be instantly recognisable to any past MDs among you. Surely, I am not the first MD to have spent her first month literally running between meetings. I mean, I had expected being MD to improve my business acumen, but my improvement on the sports field came as a nice surprise. Needless to say, being at the helm of Moreton Enterprises has been a steep learning curve, one that has allowed Lily and I, indeed the entire team, to make some really cracking mistakes. But mistakes that we have learned an awful lot from. At its heart, Moreton Enterprises remains an organisation committed to both nurturing the entrepreneurial spirit in the businesswomen of tomorrow and providing a local service to the community. Indeed, our commitment to the community is such that our newest venture is the building of a community theatre, a theatre for all. It will bring to the Welsh borders and Northern Shropshire opportunities for dance, drama and music, whilst also offering the shrewd entrepreneurs of Moreton Enterprises some exciting business opportunities.
Our businesses may be different to those of 1985, but the principles underpinning remain the same. Running Moreton Enterprises has given us an insight into the real world of business. Our businesses are all run from our enterprise centre and include Boost, our smoothie bar, essentials supplying everything from cotton wool to neon makeup for the upcoming socials, and last but not least, our tuck shop, which every good boarding school should have, and remains our most successful department. But these departments wouldn't be as successful If it wasn't for our dedicated service teams, the marketing and finance team, and product development department, who are excited to be launching our very own Moreton Spirit, homegrown, limited edition sloe gin. Clearly to be marketed at parents only. But everyone in the Moreton Enterprise team plays a vital role in keeping doors open and customers visiting. Why did I get involved in Moreton Enterprises? I saw the opportunity to learn so many invaluable skills that I'll be able to apply to whichever career path I choose. What have I learned? How to lead and motivate a team and manage the tricky relationship between employees, who are also our friends. I've learned the importance of creating a business where we are organized, learn about team management, and also about business discipline. The need to expand leadership responsibilities so that everyone feels engaged and responsible for the success of the business. Delegation is key. Whilst we may wish to do everything ourselves, to succeed, we must trust our team. But crucially, we have come to understand the importance of creating a business with longevity. To achieve this, we must plan and invest in the future. When our year as leaders of Moreton Enterprises comes to an end, we must all do our best to prepare those who succeed us, to ensure that the business is in a strong position to carry on growing and evolving. We will be passing on not just the keys, but the wisdom that we have acquired from our year of running the businesses, with the confidence that they will continue to thrive under the leadership of next year's lower sixth.
Moreton Hall is always evolving. As a sixth former, this evokes a slight sense of regret, perhaps even envy, of what we're going to miss. For me, a long-time devotee of the school productions, it will be the thrill of treading the floorboards in the brand new community theatre. This exciting new venture will become a hub for the local performing arts, drawing in both amateur groups and professional companies, as well as providing a base for Face-to-Face, our in-house theatre company, and a new home for our legendary school productions. However, for the entrepreneurs of Moreton Enterprises, the new business opportunities are even more enticing. We are already formulating plans to run the box office, to sell refreshments and merchandise, and that is just the beginning, as I am sure our innovation team have plenty more ideas tucked up in their creative sleeves. Indeed, the entrepreneurs of Moreton Enterprise just cannot wait to get this show on the road.
Enterprise and education has been championed at Moreton since the 1990s. Back then, we were saving a railway station, clearly the main aim being to see the Shrewsbury schoolboys. And now we're bringing a theatre into the mix. Nearly 30 years later, and Moreton continues to mean business. It's almost as if history is repeating itself. There's another community project in the pipeline, and us girls continue to be at the forefront, challenging the boundaries of what enterprise means. We're going to build a community theatre at Moreton. It will be a cultural flagship for North Shropshire and the Welsh borders. With 290 seats, this theatre will be open to all: the school, other local schools, and the surrounding community. It will offer a programme of arts and educational opportunities that will be vast and wide-ranging, as well as having professional and local performances in drama and dance. There will also be lectures, literary events, and even a cinema. And Moreton Enterprise is going to help run it. This project has been able to become more than just a great idea, thanks to an extremely generous donation of £500,000 from Bill and Julie Holroyd, who are passionate about establishing a centre for the performing arts. My grandfather, Jeremy Beasley, was heavily involved with Moreton several years ago. He was passionate about strengthening community links, and this is exactly the type of project that he would have supported. The creative arts play a vital role in both education and community development. This year has seen the establishment of the Creative Arts Programme, which offers students from local primary schools the opportunity to experience drama, an opportunity they wouldn't otherwise have. We also have the Face-to-Face Performance Academy, a centre for emerging actors from the local community, where they're able to hone their skills in musical theatre. So what does this theatre mean to me? Well, for me, it represents an opportunity for all those with a talent for the arts to shine. It will give all students, not just Moreton students, the opportunity to develop their skills. I have had first-hand experience in the importance that drama plays in education. As head girl, my role can sometimes be challenging, but I have no doubt that drama has equipped me with all that I have needed to succeed in this position. Teamwork, leadership, commitment, presentation, and communication, as you all know, are vital ingredients for creating a successful businesswoman. These skills will equip us for life after school, whether it's in the business world, the drama world, or pretty much any industry that you're hoping to join. There will be many old Mortonians here today reflecting on the exciting days of resurrecting Gabone Station. And the theatre is our new project. As Mr. Forster famously says, Moreton means business. And this is our next business. It is time to raise the curtain on the community theatre.
Since our last lunch in September last year, of course, we had a new US president, and it's the second time that the pollsters were confounded as to the result. Interest rates have started to rise. There's certainly a change in the air, both politically and economically. And for those that have been abroad recently, it would be no surprise to you that the sterling was the worst performing G10 currency last year. And now before us we have Article 50 and all the uncertainties that it brings. And I know our speaker this afternoon will say something about that. But these are all dilemmas for investors as you reach for yield. But as investors, you know you've got to grow your wealth, you've got to protect it, and you've got to pass it on, although I must admit that's not obligatory. And neither, of course, is it obligatory to include HMRC in your estate, although I ought to be careful and just say that you should pay unto Caesar what is due to Caesar. So if any of that is of interest to you, I've got colleagues here from the Birmingham office and the Manchester office, Nick Jones, Simon Long, Martin Lord and Charlotte Foster from the Birmingham office, myself, Audrey McKinstry, and Richard Greenhalgh from the Manchester office. I was reminded last week by my sister that she said, we all want wealth, but richness is life itself. And I don't think anybody can deny that our speaker this afternoon has led a very full and rich life indeed. He's the youngest Conservative MP at the age of 27 when he was elected to Richmond in 1989. He's had a very wide variety of ministerial posts, including leader of the party, or in his own words, leader or beleaguered leader of the opposition. We know him as Foreign Secretary, and he stood down to become leader of the House of Commons in preparation for his retirement from electoral politics, 26 years at the House of Commons, and now a life peer. And with all that, he's found time to write 2 biographies, one of which I read, which is William Pitt the Younger, of course. And therefore, it is my very great pleasure and privilege to welcome your speaker this afternoon, Lord Hague. Thank you.
Well, John, ladies and gentlemen, it's a great pleasure to be here and to thank Investec for their sponsorship today and to salute this great school. I must say, since I walked in here 2 hours ago, I've been enormously impressed by everything, really, by the school, the plans for the future, by the conversation with the pupils, by the efficiency of the lunch, by the meeting the governors, by these inspiring plans for a community theatre, by the enterprise and involvement in business. So I think all of us who are visitors today should congratulate this school on their enterprise and achievements. Give them a round of applause. And you started your introduction with an American president, and of course that's much on our minds at the moment. And when I was in America during the election a few months ago, I saw a bumper sticker that said, "Cheer up, only one of them can win." and I've got that one of them did win, we weren't very cheered up. And British politicians have always made fun of American presidents and what they say. You know, the time George Bush was asked how he was going to celebrate his first 100 days in office, and he said, 100 days? Has it been a year already? One of my favorites was when he said, you know, the trouble with the French is they have no word for entrepreneur. Just remember that among you business people. We have our own problem. We say strange things ourselves. My friend John Major once said when he was Prime Minister, when your back's to the wall, you have no option but to turn round and fight. And my dear old counterpart, John Prescott, when he'd been on a bumpy flight once and landed at Heathrow, and he said, it's good to be back on terracotta. And these things keep us amused, and I have to tell you this before we get on to anything serious. When I introduced Fionn to George W. Bush, which was quite a struggle to teach him how to pronounce her name. And we went to see him when he was governor of Texas before he was president. Boris Johnson was a reporter on the trip with us. This was before, as he puts it, he fought Clwyd South and Clwyd South fought back. He was a reporter. We went in to see George Bush, and I'd gone to talk to him about compassionate conservatism. And he got straight on to the death penalty and how many people had been executed in Texas, and I thought clearly compassion means something different in Texas. Fionn was looking a bit uneasy about this, and then he said, why doesn't your wife go with Laura and have some tea while we talk about compassion? And so she did. Fionn looked relieved and went off with Laura Bush, and while they were gone, George Bush said to me, I must get your wife's name right for the press conference. It's got 2 F's at the beginning. How do I pronounce it? And I said, well, it's Welsh. It's very simple. I said, it's how the Welsh make a difference between an F sound and a V sound. And he said, oh, so it's V at the beginning. I said, no, it's an F. I said, it's double F. That's how they make, and that's how they know it's F. He said, clever. So really, it couldn't be simpler. You just say F at it's an F at the beginning. So Fionn and Laura Bush come back. We go out to a press conference. Boris is a reporter in the front row, ready with his notebook. And George Bush said, it's good to have here in Texas today the Right Honourable Hague and his wife, Effion. Boris couldn't control him. So Boris, all this hair was going backwards and forwards, laughing. And Boris turned out to be wearing a Che Guevara watch. He had a terrorist on his watch for some reason, despite being a Daily Telegraph reporter. And George Bush saw this watch and narrowed his eyes and said, in Texas, we execute people with watches like that. And Boris was not at all sure this was a joke. And he went into the most groveling apology for his what. Now imagine how confusing it is going to be explaining to President Trump if the president of France is called Fillon, married to a Welsh lady. This is going to get bewildering for American presidents. And of course, being in office has already become a little bit bewildering. And there is, just talking now about President Trump saying 10 days ago, who thought healthcare could be so complicated? Well, actually, anybody who's dealt with it in office knows it is so complicated. It's not the same as running a business. We have fantastic business leaders in this country and around the world, and people who've built successful businesses here. Political leadership and business leadership, though, are different. Imagine running a business where the shareholders meet every day of the week and 48% of them are determined to get rid of the management. And imagine the constraints that imposes on running a business. That is what politics is like. Imagine running a business where if you're the boss and you sack one of the other directors, they leave their job, but they don't leave the building for another 5 years. That is what it is like in Parliament. Or don't leave at all in their lives. In the House of Lords, we are there for life. Once we're appointed, nobody can do anything about it. It makes it a very elderly assembly. I ran up the stairs there last week and got a round of applause. Imagine running a business where people can write to you about anything and expect to get a reply. That is government. I got a letter from a Yorkshire constituent once that said, I hope you can take some constructive criticism of your recent speech. It was rubbish. When I was pensions minister, I got one that said, if I get more money as a result of writing to you, you can have half. And it said, don't tell anybody. My favorite letter I ever got was a very short one. It said, Dear Mr. Hague, the Taliban have taken over Anne Widdecombe's body and no one has noticed. That was the whole letter, you're sincerely. Somebody took the time and trouble to write to the Foreign Secretary to say that. And imagine a business where you debate with your opponents all the time, in public. And I once watched in the House of Commons the Minister for the Civil Service being asked by I think it was Dennis Skinner or another very left-wing MP who asked, he said, how many of the people recruited to the civil service in the last year were A, men, or B, women? And the minister answered, all of them. you have to think fast in the House of Commons. So it's different in all of these ways. It is immensely fulfilling, a political career. Thinking of the young people sitting at the back there, I hope some of them go into politics and government. It is the most frustrating business you can ever be involved in. Sometimes the most distressing. And as Foreign Secretary, I saw some of the worst things you can ever see in the world, in Libya and Afghanistan and Iraq, and all the times I was in downtown Mogadishu, which was more than once. And deeply frustrating things. You know, for me, the most frustrating experience ever in my career was our attempt to solve the Syria crisis 5 years ago and coming so close to it, trying to bring the Assad regime and their opponents into sharing power that would have saved a couple of 100,000 lives by now if we had managed to do so. And yet we could not manage, partly because of the policies of Russia, to bring them together. These things are immensely frustrating, but there are also things that are immensely fulfilling. And when I look back on 26 years in the House of Commons, and 6 years into that, I wrote and took through Parliament the Disability Discrimination Act, which is the thing I'm proudest of in my time in politics, which then I look back at that 20 years later. I took that through in 1995. And it was a landmark piece of legislation that has helped to give greater opportunity and equality to millions of disabled people. So in politics you experience really the worst and the best of life. And I think it is important to keep our optimism as we think about the post-Brexit world. It's difficult at times. when you look at the daily news. But we do have to keep our optimism because we happen to live at the best time there's ever been to be a human being, statistically. We are living dramatically longer. We are tackling diseases incredibly successfully. Poverty has been massively reduced in the world. There are no famines except those brought about by incompetence and war. Nobody needs to starve in the world anymore. In fact, statistically now, we're at the first moment in our history where you are more likely to die from eating too much than from eating too little, something you should have borne in mind before lunch today. But all of these are very optimistic things. They are great things for the future, for young people planning their career. We achieve extraordinary things diplomatically. I was part of the negotiations with Iran over their nuclear program. 7 years ago, I would have thought it much more likely we would end up in a war with Iran than sitting around a table agreeing that they would dismantle their nuclear program, which is then what happened. Even 6 months before that, we wouldn't have imagined that happening. And so it is possible for the world to go in the right direction with the immense human ingenuity that can be deployed on all of these subjects. And as we speak, economic growth in the world seems to be picking up a little bit, which is bringing those rising interest rates in the United States that you just heard about. But something is also clearly very wrong. There is a seething discontent, particularly in Western countries. And we saw in the 1990s the rapid march of technology, the extraordinary growth of China, and the end of the Cold War together brought what we now call globalization, the rise of giant global companies, nations seeming to become less important, the triumph of capitalism, the rise of much more migration and trade, the end of history, in the words of one respected commentator, that all ideological battles were now over, the future of the world was clear. But it's now clear, actually, that those developments, which have brought a web of closer connections between people all over the world, have also brought divisions within countries. They have made London more distant politically and socially from Sunderland, or New York from Kansas, or Paris from Marseille. And so nations have become more divided, and some people have felt they have lost control over what has happened in their lives. They have lost economic control, and at some levels of income, people have had stagnant living standards for a long time, and there has been greater inequality of wealth. Technology is challenging more and more jobs and careers and changing them. And culturally, in some countries, there is a shrinking majority that feel that everyone else's identity is protected and celebrated other than their own. And so all of these people are now trying to take back control in some way. And they're using the nation state to do so. The nation is fighting back. And so when you see the rise of Donald Trump, or the speeches of Nicola Sturgeon, or the campaign of Marine Le Pen, or the politics and campaign of Nigel Farage, they are, in their own different national ways, different aspects of the same thing. People voting for them to try to find control again, to control what's happening to them in a world of globalization. And politics is being transformed by that, at the same time as the center-left is collapsing in many Western countries. I won't go too much into the state of our own Labour Party, but that speaks for itself. But the same is true of the French Socialist Party. The Dutch Labour Party lost 3/4 of its seats in their general election 2 days ago. And the center-right is being pulled in a more nationalistic direction by the forces that I have just described. And politics is therefore opened up for populists, for independents. This is reinforced by the prevalence of social media in political discourse. There is Donald Trump tweeting at 6:30 every morning, or 3 in the morning, and the rest of the media lapping it up. He has used social media to transform how politics is conducted. This is something that I worry about a good deal. The problem with so much of social media and internet communication is that everything is programmed to give you more of what you already like and agree with. And this is nice on Netflix when you go and they say, now you've watched that film, here are 10 more films that you will want to see. But repeated across all sources of news and information, this is polarizing opinion, giving people less challenge, and they're not always hearing the alternative point of view. Really, what should happen in the future is here are 9 things you want to see and 1 thing you are going to hate seeing, but you ought to watch because it will be good for you and for your brain. And I can see this being regulated by law in the end. So politics is changing in all of these ways. The nation state is asserting itself again. And that means border adjustment taxes in the United States. It means the French presidential election coming up the next few weeks being between nationalist economics and liberal economics. It means in developing countries, a very important development, a country like Indonesia has just decided to limit the export of raw materials so that it can bring processing industries into its own borders. And the Philippines and African countries are looking at doing the same thing. It means in the United Kingdom that Scotland is on a new bid, Scottish nationalists at least, are on a new bid to break away. And I believe that these trends in politics are likely to accelerate in the coming years, because these economic and technological and cultural trends are likely to stay with us. And in particular, a transformation of a great deal of work through artificial intelligence and technology that will have a profound social and political effect. The McKinsey Global Institute recently estimated that the impact of technological change in the next 20 years will have 3,000 times the impact of the Industrial Revolution. Now, I don't quite believe that, but let's say it's 3 times the impact of the Industrial Revolution. The Industrial Revolution brought the rise of cities, democracy, mass political parties, political revolutions across most of Europe. Something 3 times as big as that, let alone 3,000 times as big as that, is going to have a massive effect, with new issues confronting business and all of us. Issues about whether technology should be taxed. If robots are taking human jobs, shouldn't they be paying national insurance contributions? There is a problem for a budget and for Philip Hammond in the future. Should there be a national basic income, which everybody receives? How do we create lifelong learning and training, since it will no longer be possible to live on a stock of knowledge acquired in your early years in education? We all have to live in a flow of knowledge that is constantly renewed. And how can the private sector contribute to that, since governments won't be able to keep up with the speed of change that is required? These are some of the issues that are now coming down the track, that are very rapidly coming towards us. This is the post-Brexit world. And you will gather from my description of it that, in my view, one of the main things about the post-Brexit world is Brexit is not remotely the main thing that is happening in it. Most of these forces will have a bigger effect on the success or failure of Britain or individual businesses than what happens in Brexit. But Brexit is a manifestation of these global events and forces. It will now be an immense preoccupation. And I was against it, even though I am deeply unenthusiastic about many aspects of the European Union, and I led the campaign in this country in the late 1990s against joining the euro. I was nevertheless in favor of remaining in the EU because I feared what would happen to Scotland. I feared destabilizing Northern Ireland, and both of these things are now coming to pass. And also I feared a consuming effort for several years between the British and other European governments that would take over from many other important challenges to negotiate the exit from the EU. But even though I think those things, I do think it now has to go ahead. I don't think there is any going back on the referendum. On this, I disagree with Tony Blair, who called for people to rise up against Brexit. It is too late for that. To try to reverse what was decided in the referendum last year would create years, even decades of bitterness and division, and would probably not even be successful even after that. And a country can't go round in circles. We can't be leaving the EU in 2016 and joining it in 2018 and leaving it again in 2020. A decision has to be a decision, and now we have to make a success of it. And of course, that means seeking a reasonable agreement with the EU. Some people ask, well, why can't we just leave? Why, like leaving a house and slam the door? And the problem with that is we're not actually going anywhere. We're not leaving Europe. It is more akin to staying in a house with someone that you've been sharing it with the last few years and agreeing how to divide it up. That requires a negotiation if everything is going to work in that house. This is a negotiation about hundreds of things that not everybody realized were involved with the European Union. We have to negotiate how the air traffic system works. We have to negotiate who can fish where. And we could talk for years about that alone. You have to negotiate how you run a border between Northern Ireland outside the EU and the Irish Republic inside the EU, which has never been done before, and nobody knows how they are going to do it. And hundreds of other comparable subjects. And I believe it will be possible to get a reasonable agreement, but there is a risk, of course, of no agreement being made. And the UK has to be prepared for that. Some of these subjects will be deeply vexing and emotional. The apparent demand by the European Union for 60 billion euros for Britain to leave is an unreasonable demand and will be seen as such by everybody in the UK. There could be a successful negotiation about that, but not unless they move quite a long distance, I would imagine, off that figure. And I hope that the UK, of course, will continue to approach it on both sides in a constructive way. We will see in a couple of weeks when this process really begins. I think it will have many moments when it looks like it's going to break down, and other moments when it looks like it's going well, and the pound will go up and down, businesses will be optimistic or depressed. So everybody will have to keep a steady view through all of this. I once said, actually I am meant to have said, I once read somewhere that I had said about something that I can't remember I said, but it sounds good, so I'm happy to have said it. Apparently I once said of the Conservative Party that it only has two states of mind, complacency or panic. And I think this will be the case for the whole country about these negotiations. 1 week will bring complacency and the next week will bring panic. And actually people have to have a steady, realistic view all along. The real action will in any case be towards the end of the negotiations, because that is when you would make your concessions if you're really going to make them. And so for a long time, through 2 years of negotiations, it will be unclear how they are going to turn out. I hope the UK can make a reasonable offer to the rest of the EU on migration, the issue that really tipped the balance in the referendum. Getting control, that point again, over migration was what made all the difference to the outcome of the referendum. And I have floated the idea of a system where we say we will have a work permit system to come in from the EU to work here. But if you get a job, you can have a work permit from the rest of the EU. We won't give you any benefits, we won't give you a house, but you can come and work in the UK. And indeed, unless we allow those people to come and work in the UK, we will not be able to build the houses that we need, or staff the National Health Service, or even serve people in most London restaurants. So we are going to need to do that. And I think such a position would win some acceptance and get things off to a good start in those negotiations. At the same time, looking more broadly, we have to bear in mind the immense challenges to Europe as a whole. And that's why Brexit also has to be seen in perspective. Europe sees now multiple challenges. From Russia, for instance, it is the clear strategy, in my view, of Moscow to neuter the European Union. It is as clear as if it was written on the wall that it is their purpose to prevent Europe having the political will to put sanctions on Russia, to interfere as they see it in Ukraine, to resist sales of more Russian gas. And President Putin has embarked on a clear strategy of using interference in Western elections. Through that social media, again, this has opened up elections to foreign interference, as we have seen in the United States. Military intimidation here and there, corruption here and there, direct financing of political parties such as the French National Front, to ensure that enough people are elected across Europe that Europe can't take a strong position vis-à-vis Russia. And he's doing pretty well at implementing that strategy. Then there is the great challenge of the Eurozone. I've been wrong about many things in my career, but I think I've always been right about the euro, so I'm going to go on being right about the euro. It is a disaster for Europe. I described it 20 years ago as a burning building with no exits. I was denounced for such literally inflammatory statements. If you are Greek, that is what it is. It has inflicted the Great Depression on you for no good reason other than the folly of the people who designed it. And in the end, it will break, although it may take some time to do so. And then there is the great challenge of migration. Population growth around the world has slowed down, except in Africa and the Middle East. And we expect the population of Africa and the Middle East to double in the next 30 years, an extra 1.2 billion people. If 5% of the population of that region try to move to Europe, then you have the whole population of Britain and France on the move, the equivalent of that. This is what will make or break the European Union. And so there is an urgent need to be able to control that, but to be able to accept a certain level of migration and to be able to integrate people successfully into European societies and communities. And it is on that that the future of Europe will rest, rather than what happens in those Brexit negotiations. Britain, I believe, can make a success of itself if we use the freedoms that come from leaving the EU, since we are going to suffer the disadvantages, the many disadvantages anyway. And that means we should be innovative about tax to draw more industries to this country, about promoting technical education. The T levels announced in the budget were a good idea. We could have things like free ports where we set up parts of the UK which don't have customs, duties, and regulations, and where goods can be imported and re-exported. Things that you cannot do when you're in the European Union. We should make the most of our national geography and situation, and we should maintain an internationalist approach while making the most of our national advantages. And I think that is the answer to this resentment of globalization. For a successful nation to maintain its engagement with the rest of the world, as we do, supporting the development of other countries and the security of our allies and peace and security across the world, while making the most of our own national advantages. This is the way forward, and I hope it will be the way forward for presidents of the United States, including President Trump as well. I'm concerned as to whether it is the view of President Trump and whether he will take nationalist economics too far. But this is the post-Brexit world, a period of great political volatility and unpredictability, where the received wisdom about what is going to happen will often be wrong, but in which national policies and politics are coming back into interfering in business to a much greater extent in the last 20 years. And that's vital to recognize as we approach the next 20 years. And I think, in closing, before we have our questions, there are some lessons of that for any organization or business. There are certain things that you need in this post-Brexit world. One is resilience built into an organization, to be able to cope with something nobody ever predicted. And I tried to do that at the Foreign Office. I found it more useful to set up a crisis center that I could activate at half an hour's notice to deal with all the crises nobody had predicted than it was to invest more resources in more experts trying to predict what was happening next. So building resilience rather than trying to predict everything into decisions and organizations is necessary in this situation. Diversity of advice is crucial in this situation. The received wisdom is so often wrong. The moment I thought Donald Trump might win the presidency was when I saw the New York Times gave an 84% probability on election day that Hillary Clinton would win, which was exactly the same percentage as polls gave on the 23rd of June last year that the Remain side would win. So when you see something is 84% likely, it isn't going to happen. And that means every board of directors, every school, every political party needs diversity of advice, diversity in every sense. This situation calls for more local understanding, intelligence, and decision-making. Since if you're operating in different parts of the world, what happens in one nation state will more radically differ in the next 20 years from the neighboring nations than has been the case the last 20 or 30 years. And so the global answer to everything will not apply. Local decision-making and intelligence will be even more crucial. And long-term thinking, of course, will be important. Of course, that is obvious, and we've all always said that. But in a world of more short-term panics, the long-term strategy and sticking to it, if it's successful, becomes more important. So resilience, diversity, local knowledge and decision-making, and long-term thinking will be at a premium in the coming years in business, government, and many other fields of life. And from what I've seen in the last few hours here at this school, there are a lot of people who believe in these things. And I hope the pupils at this school will go on to build their own resilience, and they're certainly part of the diversity of the future of this country, and certainly part of any long-term thinking for it. So I again salute what you do here. This is my view, as briefly as I can state it, of the post-Brexit world. On that sober and confusing note, I will stop, and it's been a great pleasure speaking to you all. Thank you very much indeed.